Well, now that President Tinubu has set up a panel to comprehensively assess the financial framework of social investment programs, there are questions on the current decisions that led to the suspension of the minister in charge, Betta Edu. Now, let's take you through some of them.
That's right. Now, with the refusal of the Accountant General of the Federation to honor Edu's request, was the 582.19 million naira eventually released to Onielu, Bridget Mujisola? If it was, the instruction was to pay into a UBA account number 200-3682-151. Now, the question is, did the UBA flag the transaction as required by the NFIA law? Indeed, is the identity of Onielu Bridget Mujisola still a subject of dispute? And going by the request for the release of the money, it was grants for vulnerable groups in 4 states: Akwa Ibom, Cross River, Lagos, and Ogun.
Well, so what were the criteria used in selecting the 4 states? Questions are also being asked about the role of the permanent secretary as the chief accounting officer of the ministry. We're joined now by a former Director General of Voice of Nigeria, Osita Okechukwu, and in our overflow studio, Dr. Sam Amadi. Good to see you both, gentlemen. I think it's the first time I'm meeting you this year, so Happy New Year's in order. But again, Nigerians are happy, and while some people are not too excited, thinking that something that has to do with humanitarian is almost getting to be inhuman to what Nigerians are going through. Let's start with you, Dr. Amadi. Let us in on your first thought when this story broke and the push by Nigerians for the president to act.
Well, thank you for having me, and Happy New Year. Again, the first point, my first sense was the deja vu. We're back to this track again. I mean, even though this is the first time that EFCC is officially questioning the former Minister of Humanitarian Services, there was clear cases during the COVID lockdown, allegations, school feeding, issues around general perception of corruption or mismanagement or misapplication of funds. So it was like this ministry again. That's the first thought. Again, I thought around the question of the scandal of poverty in a country like Nigeria, with a lot of abundant human resources, a lot of natural resources. We've seen, for example, 5 billion to be used for student board, but 6 billion to do a car park for National Assembly. So the gross misapplication of resources. Then if you just oppose it with what now appears like stealing from the poor or stealing in the name of the poor, it becomes a double scandal. The poverty is scandalous in terms of our potential as a country, which is because of misallocation, because of our budget does not reflect that commitment to, inclusive economic growth. And again, on top of it, we now have public officers who are now deliberately mismanaging, and in many cases, as it now looks like, it may be misappropriating that fund. So my sense was, look, this is like double whammy. You have an illness, and the cure is more dangerous than the illness. The cure was partly this cash transfer, this social protection structure, which I have complained that if you look at the history of countries like China, particularly, that has done a lot for removing people from poverty, the thing that's critical is mainstreaming the poor in policy and service delivery, number one. 2, where there are going to be cash transfers, there must be a legal framework for entitlement and a procedure for criteria for determination and transparent real-time means of transfer. So this idea of warehousing funds and say, look, we're going to deal with vulnerable people. Who are they? So again, why do we create this ministry? So my first thought was, looks like a slush fund that politicians, the former government and now this government, and the people who man these portfolios don't have pedigree in either social science or policy understanding. So what are they really going to do to share funds? And that's what makes it maybe a disaster waiting to happen.
Osita Okechukwu, I mean, you're a former Director General of the Voice of Nigeria. From your experience, what really is a typical process of disbursement of funds, especially when you talk about, social intervention programs like this? And bear in mind some of the posers we put out there. I mean, was the fund released? It was released to a bank. Did the bank flag, the huge amount that was deposited or even withdrawn from it? So many questions. Help us understand how, funds move from one government account, to solve social intervention programs, for example.
Thank you very much and Happy New Year.
Same to you.
Let me start by commending Mr. President for raising the ante on the anti-graft war. While we talk about the ministers and the Social Investment Fund, we cannot forget as well that for the first time, the EFCC, led by Olukoede, went to the big firms to cross-check what happened to forex allocation for the last 9 years. For me, that's the major, what I could call hope renewal of the anti-graft war President Bola Tinubu GCFR. On the public accounts, it's been one of the gains of our democracy when they talked about due process. They talked of Treasury, TSA. What it means is that you are not supposed to have a private account as regards public funds. The financial regulation was very clear on that, under section 713 or so, that you do not put your own private money into public accounts and you do not remove the one from public account to your own. Unless if you are a contractor, a consultant, and for you to win an award, there are also processes, one of which is that it should be advertised. And if it's advertised, during the bid opening, both the civil society organization, both the EFCC and other security agencies will have representation to make sure that clearly the winner is the winner. So those processes might be long, but they have helped to save billions from the Nigerian coffers. So for those who manipulate them, they will not say they are not aware. And basically they told us that ignorance of the law
is not an excuse.
Is not an excuse. So we must commend Mr. President. For some of us who did not expect, it had happened all over the world. Once in a while, changes come from unexpected quarters. Some people did not, in any iota of their imagination, that this kind of anti-graft war will be waged by President Tinubu. We have to commend him. We have to also pray for him. We have to also insist that he should
let me
put
jump
through.
in here. Let me jump in here, and I crave your indulgence, Dr. Amadi. A minute. Let me take this to Osita Okechukwu. Now he's doing the prayers. I really want to bring in an observation that may also worry him. Is it okay to say the president is today, without saying it publicly to everyone, that he's all out to probe some of the issues that Nigerians were not too happy about with the last administration, that of President Buhari. For instance, you're looking at what's happening with Bawa, Sadia, even Emefiele. And if you also look at some of the key talk is about people who are the founding members of CPC. And the worry here is as if the CPC, some of these people didn't give two hoots about what went down about Nigeria's money.
Dr. Okechukwu, that question is for you.
No, Mr. Okechukwu, I didn't pass to get a PhD. To be honest with you, sincerely, most of us hold the view that it's not only Abacha that start money abroad. So all President Tinubu to look into our coffers. I remember a meeting we held sometimes with one of the Swedish diplomats, and he told us it's not the only Abacha money that is with them, but under their laws, they cannot return any fund not requested by the home country. So, Mr. President has started step one, and we're encouraging him to go further.
I'm sorry, maybe you didn't get my point. My point is, as a founding member of the CPC, which now is a part of the APC, if you look at the aviation minister, if you're looking at Sadia, and you look at some of these few people that we're talking about, some concerns by Nigerians is that at that point in time when President Buhari was there, he cared less when people spoke about the malfeasance or alleged malfeasance of some of these people. So is it something that is ideological for the old CPC to think that everyone is sparkling clean when truly
they're not?
They're not.
I got your question. The demarcation I have with your question is that we are talking back not just the CPC. Even when Nuhu Ribadu was the chairman of the EFCC, he listed some governors, some officials, and we are saying, please, don't demarcate whether CPC, even if it's Osito Okechukwu, please include me inside the list. But we are saying going back 20, 30 years back, it's not late. There's a saying in my place that a thief should be made to refund whatever was stolen, whether it is 100 years. So the issue of trying to pigeonhole CPC, APC is not my concern now.
Right.
My concern is that President Tinubu, like the wife told us in the Thanksgiving service last year, the wife said, we thank God for what he had done for the family. We are not coming to power to loot. Rather, we're going to put things right. So if she goes by what the First Lady, our own First Lady, Senator Remy, said, I will acknowledge that, and Nigeria will be in the history as one of the countries where changes came from unexpected quarters. A lot of us did not expect that Mr. President would be that courageous to move into the big wigs. So I'm not trying to separate whether CPC, whether Osito Okechukwu. Please, we need to recover the money. We're now the world poverty capital. Am I happy about that? I'm not.
Okay,
we have a dead body in our neck.
Yeah, let me bring in Dr. Sam Amadi here. And this question I'd like to pose to both of you, but I'd like Dr. Sam Amadi to start, the response. Talking about the second leg of that earlier question by Sulai, the major concern now is that the humanitarian agency, whether in the last administration or this present one, seems to be some kind of honeypot for members of the governing political party. Is that what it's looking like to you? And would you want to respond to that point made by Osita Okechukwu here that, look, sometimes good things come from unexpected quarters? With what's happening with Tinubu's seeming anti-corruption fight, it's a good signal that indeed he may not have promised much, but he seems to be doing a lot there.
Sure. I mean, there are evidence in history, or what to call inflection point. Crisis can generate transformation. And so this government is facing a crisis now of corruption. I mean, this is just barely 7 months. A top government official is involved in this. And so it's really a crisis. But then, like Rami Manuel said, and several other people, the crisis is a big thing, a good thing to waste. So President Tinubu can transform this crisis, mind this crisis, to reshape his government. I take the view that the president set up his government wrongly. I take the view that some of the officials he appointed were not the right kind of people to drive, what he should do post-Buhari. That's my view. So now, if you kick out what looks like not fit for purpose, then he can use this moment, ride the storm, ride the momentum, to recreate his government, redirect his government, again, win support. This is a government, like it or hate it, that won a limited mandate. In political theory, your mandate is limited when the opposition, if you put them together, more people rejected at the poll. But it's not fatal. You can recreate your own legitimacy by how you govern. So the president has opportunity now to expand his legitimacy, not legal legitimacy. Of course, it's legitimate legally, Supreme Court says so, INEC says so. But the political legitimacy is a question of, recreating hope and expanding that legitimacy. And this could be a moment, inflection point. But again, the key point here is, like he said, I think we need to come back to say, not too much praise at this point. I mean, the pressure for civil society was strong. The alleged crime is so manifest so. I mean, this is a contraction on the face of it. And the president often would dismiss the minister straight away and probably conduct some investigation, not necessarily that the ministers don't have any guaranteed tenure. The minister serves at the pleasure of the president. And the president can look at, even if he didn't commit a crime, even if the actions are not criminally, indictable, they could become misconduct that could damage or create a baggage for the president. So he has taken the right action. Maybe my argument would have been there's no place for suspension. He would have probably sacked the minister and then investigate all the people who are involved. But again, the next step would now be that we want to see real investigation throw up real people. For example, the questions raised has to be answered in a transparent manner. That will give more impetus to Tinubu's recreation of himself, rebranding. Osita speaks, that this could be a moment. This could be the moment. Now, back to the issue of whether CPC, APC, or everybody. I think, look, political governance in the presidential system is determined by political incentives. The president has incentive to go after political opponents or persons who are not within his political corridor. That's a given incentive. What matters is whether he goes after them legitimately, due process. So if you tell me, look at this point, people have argued also that there are people in this government who are dispensable, meaning they're not too close in the corridor. So let's see if the president moves also against the indispensables, if they are indicted. So in a way, Bete Edu is not very indispensable. He could fall into the dispensable. So people can argue, cynically, that this could be a dispensable and give the president major political capital. But the real question is, how do you go against the seemingly indispensable? How do you act when it hits close to you, the ACN family? Okay. The CPC family is in trial. But that's fine for the country. We want, like Osita says, let it go around. Let's save this republic. But let's not forget that political incentive is real. Right. Sometimes you act because it favors you.
Osita Okechukwu, let's talk about very quickly. Mr. Okechukwu. I don't know why I prefer to call you doctor or professor for that matter. Let's talk about the palliatives, for example. It's part of what this agency, the NSI, PA, Social Investment Program Agency, was supposed to provide. There seems to be a lot of lack of transparency on the issue of palliatives. The National Assembly, for example, has been accused of getting palliatives and not distributing it to the populations. And they are expected to be the ones to begin to fight this war against corruption and lack of transparency, especially when it concerns the citizenry. What do you have to say about that?
It was early in the morning that I was going through the social media that I read one of the major newspapers, one of the newspapers I have great regard for, Daily Trust, in the front banner. So I called the senator that represents my Enugu West Senatorial District. I called the honorable member that represents the federal constituency. I started calling my friends who are in the Senate and in the House. And most of them told me actually that approval was done for that, for the palliative to come from the Federal Ministry of Agriculture. So this morning I went to Federal Ministry of Agriculture. I couldn't meet the minister, but I met some of his top officials. They said yes, that the approval was for them to give the allocations, not to give cash. And that in assembling the allocations to meet with 469 honorable members, distinguished senators, could not be done in a jiffy. That was why the delay. So I understand that about 95 or 98% did not access, or that those who did so, out of their own resource, said, okay, since this is coming, why don't we do that while we're in the Christmas season?
I don't understand. Are you saying the lawmakers, out of their own personal purse?
Few, very few. They have not dispersed. The
gave palliatives.
The Federal Ministry of Agriculture said they have not assembled.
Okay.
And I also read this evening the distinguished senators from Kwara State, where they issued a statement that to their constituents, yes, we thank Mr. President for such an approval, but it has not gotten to us. And I called one of my friends who represent the Kwara Central, the Trachea of Ilori, distinguished Senator Salu Mustafa, who were friends back years. I said, oh boy, what's going on? And he repeated the same thing I found in the Ministry of Agriculture. The one my distinguished Senator Ngu that represent me told me. So please, it's not good to, because of the fact that we're in a hazy situation where nobody believes anybody, for people to start haranguing the members. They were not giving, they are not going to be giving cash.
I think we've been asked to wind down. I'm sorry. We really do hope that, well, those meant, just as Dr. Amadi said, you can be in charge of humanitarian affairs and you become inhuman or inhumane. That's the whole point. We'd like to thank you, Dr. Sam Amadi and Mr. Osita Okechukwu.